Jimin did not sleep that night. She sat in her quarters on the station and worked through data until her eyes burned. Minho brought her coffee every hour. He looked like he had been crying, but his hands were steady now. He was angry, and anger was better than despair. The Galactic Trade Network was vast and complicated. Millions of transactions happened every day across hundreds of star systems, but Jimin knew how to look for patterns. She had spent years studying alien systems. She knew how to find what was hidden. What she found made her want to scream. "Ambassador," she said when Hyunwoo arrived at dawn. "You need to see this." Hyunwoo looked exhausted. He had been on calls with Earth all night. The news about the 47 children had reached home. People were demanding answers. Parents were checking on their children in a panic. Every colony was reviewing their missing persons reports. Jimin showed him her screen. I traced back every incident where human children went missing. Mining accidents, ship failures, natural disasters. Every time children disappeared and bodies were never found. She pulled up a chart. Then I cross-referenced those dates with shipping manifests in the Galactic Network. Krell ships, Draconian transports, Vraxian cargo vessels. Every single incident matches up with a departure from our space within 72 hours. Hyunwoo stared at the data. "How many?" 2,000 at minimum, Jimin said quietly. "Probably closer to 3,000. Over 30 years since first contact." Minho made a sound like he had been punched. Hyunwoo closed his eyes. "Where did they go?" Hyunwoo asked. Jimin pulled up another file. Research facilities across 12 systems. Private collections owned by wealthy aliens. Entertainment venues. Labor colonies where small hands are needed for delicate work. There's an entire industry built around this. She showed them images. Children in clean white rooms being studied by alien scientists. Children performing for crowds of beings who found humans exotic and interesting. Children working in mines too narrow for adults. All of them were alive. All of them were well-fed and healthy, but none of them were free. "They're treated well," Minho said bitterly. "Like valuable pets." Hyunwoo sat down heavily. "We need to take this to the council." "I already requested a hearing," Jimin said. "They've granted us time this afternoon." The council chamber looked different in the daylight. The aliens seemed less imposing, more ordinary, but that made what Hyunwoo had to say even more terrible. These were not monsters. They were civilized beings who ran a society that spanned the galaxy. And they had allowed this to happen. Hyunwoo presented the evidence methodically. He showed the data. He displayed the images. He read the numbers aloud so everyone would hear. 3,000 children, he said. Taken over 30 years, studied, collected, displayed, used for labor. All perfectly legal under your laws. The council members listened in silence. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed indifferent. Overseer Vrax watched without any visible emotion. "This is unacceptable," Hyunwoo said. "I demand that every child be returned immediately. I demand that those responsible be prosecuted. And I demand that these laws be changed so this can never happen again." Overseer Vrax shifted slightly. "Your demands are noted. However, you must understand that these practices are not unique to humanity. Every species that joins the council goes through this transition period." A draconian representative spoke up. Its voice was a low rumble. "My species endured similar circumstances 2,000 years ago. It is regrettable but necessary. Once you achieve full membership, these protections will apply to your children." "How long does that take?" Jimin asked sharply. "The membership process typically requires 20 to 30 years, Vrax explained. During that time, your species must demonstrate stability, technological capability, and cultural compatibility. So for 20 more years, our children are fair game," Hyunwoo said flatly. "That is an emotional oversimplification," Vrax replied, "but essentially accurate. However, we can expedite your membership if you demonstrate exceptional cooperation." Minho stood up suddenly. "This is insane. You're asking us to cooperate while our children are being stolen. You want us to smile and be patient while they're caged and studied." "Sit down, Minho," Hyunwoo said quietly. The young man sat, but his hands were clenched into fists. A being made of flowing water spoke. Its voice sounded like rain. "We understand your distress. But this is how galactic civilization functions. There must be order. There must be rules. Not all of them are pleasant. Your rules permit the trafficking of children," Jimin said. "What kind of civilization is that?" Before anyone could answer, the chamber doors opened. A figure entered and every council member suddenly went still. Even Overseer Vrack seemed to straighten slightly. The newcomer was difficult to look at directly. Its form kept shifting, changing from solid to liquid to gas and back again. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere at once. "I am Subin of the Talshara Coalition," the being said. "I have been listening to these proceedings." Hyunwoo had heard of the Talshara. They were one of the 3 founding species of the Council. They were ancient beyond human comprehension. They rarely involved themselves in the affairs of younger species. "Ambassador Subin," Vrack said, "your presence honors us. However, this matter concerns a pre-council species. It does not require your attention." Subin's form solidified slightly. It took on a shape that was almost humanoid, perhaps out of respect for the Earth delegation. "I will decide what requires my attention." The Talshara floated closer to where Hyunwoo stood. "I have reviewed the evidence presented by the humans. I have examined the trade records. I have seen the images of their children in captivity." Subin turned to face the council. "I have one question for this assembly." The chamber was completely silent. Hyunwoo could hear his own heartbeat. "Did you cage their children?" Subin asked. The voice was quiet, but it filled the enormous room. "Did you truly traffic in the young of a species still learning to walk among the stars?" No one answered. Overseer Vrax attempted to speak, but Subin raised a hand. "Do not answer yet," the Talshara said. "I want you to think very carefully about what you have done. I want you to remember the founding principles of this council, and then I want you to explain to me how this is acceptable." A Krell representative attempted to speak. "With respect, Ambassador Subin, these practices have been standard for thousands of years. Every species endures this transition. It is simply the way things are done." "The way things are done," Subin repeated. The being's form flickered with what might have been anger. "I was there when this council was founded. I helped write the original treaties. Do you know what they said about children?" The Krell did not respond. "They said that no civilization worthy of the stars would harm the young of any species," Subin continued. "That in the young lies the future of all peoples. That the treatment of children is the measure of a society's soul." The Talshara turned back to Hyunwoo. "I apologize on behalf of this council. What has been done to your children is wrong. It has always been wrong, and it will be made right." "Ambassador Subin," Vrack said carefully, "you cannot make such promises. The law is clear." "Then the law will change," Subin said, "or this council will fall." The chamber erupted in protests and arguments. Council members shouted at each other in a dozen different languages. Hyunwoo stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. Subin moved close to him and spoke softly. "You must prepare yourselves. What comes next will not be easy. Your species will face a choice, and that choice will define your place in the galaxy forever." Before Hyunwoo could ask what that meant, the Talshara vanished. The chamber fell silent again. Overseer Vrax looked at the human delegation. For the first time, there was something like concern in its crystalline features. "This session is adjourned. We will reconvene tomorrow to discuss these matters further." As they left the chamber, Minho whispered, "What just happened?" Jimin shook her head. "I think we just started a war. Not with weapons, but something worse." Hyunwoo said nothing. He was thinking about Subin's words. A choice that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. He already knew what that choice would be. Humanity would never accept what had been done to their children. Never forgive. Never forget. The only question was what form their response would take, and that frightened him more than anything. The council chamber was enormous. Hyunwoo stood in the center of the vast room and felt very small. Above him, alien beings sat on platforms that reached toward the ceiling. Some glowed with strange lights. Others shifted and changed shape as they watched. The air smelled wrong, like metal and something sweet he could not name. Hyunwoo was Earth's ambassador. He had been chosen because he was calm under pressure. He had worked in difficult negotiations before, but nothing had prepared him for this. The aliens looked down at him like he was an insect under glass. He straightened his back and tried not to show fear. Beside him stood Jimin. She was a scientist who studied alien life. Her hands gripped a tablet so tightly her knuckles were white. On Hyunwoo's other side was Minho, a young assistant who had only been working for the diplomatic team for 6 months. The boy looked terrified. The leader of the council was called Overseer Vrax. It looked like a being made of crystal and light. When it spoke, The words came through a device that translated the sounds into human language. The voice was cold and precise. "You seek membership in our council," Vrax said. "This is a great honor. Few species are invited to join." Hyunwoo nodded. "Humanity is grateful for this opportunity. We hope to learn from the elder races and contribute what we can." The presentation had been going well. Hyunwoo had shown images of Earth, talked about human culture and technology. The council members seemed interested, though it was hard to tell with being so different from humans. Some had no faces at all. Then the doors at the back of the chamber burst open. Minho stumbled in, his face pale and sweating. He carried a tablet and shaking hands. "Ambassador," Minho said, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this immediately." Hyunwoo frowned. Minho knew better than to interrupt unless it was urgent. He took the tablet and looked at the screen. His blood went cold. "What is it?" Jimin whispered. Hyunwoo could not speak for a moment. The words on the screen made no sense. They could not be real, but the images showed the truth. A ship was stopped near Saturn, he said slowly. One of our patrol vessels intercepted it. The ship was registered to a Krell merchant company. The Krell were an insect-like race. They were traders moving goods between star systems. They had a good reputation. Humanity had done business with them before without problems. The cargo hold, Hyunwoo continued, his voice shaking now, contained 47 human children. Jimin gasped. Several of the alien council members shifted in their seats. Overseer Vrax tilted its crystalline head. The children were in stasis pods, Hyunwoo read from the report. Ages 6 to 14. They were taken from a colony on Ganymede 3 months ago. We thought they died in a mining accident. His hands were shaking now. He looked up at the council members. Someone took our children and put them in cages like animals. They were being transported somewhere. The Krell captain says he was taking them to a research facility. The chamber was silent. Hyunwoo felt rage building in his chest. These children had families. Parents who mourned them. Brothers and sisters who cried at night. And all this time they had been alive, stolen, and shipped across space like cargo. "I demand an explanation," Hyunwoo said. His voice was louder now. "How is this possible? How is this legal?" Overseer Vrax was quiet for a moment. When it spoke, the tone had not changed at all. The Krell merchant followed proper procedures. Specimens from pre-council species may be acquired for research purposes with the appropriate permits. Specimens. Jimin's voice was sharp. Those are children. Human children. Not specimens. Your species has not yet achieved full council membership, Vrax explained. Therefore, certain protections do not apply. This is standard practice. All species go through this transition period. Hyunwoo stared at the crystalline being. You're telling me that kidnapping children is legal as long as they're from a species not yet in your council? The terminology is imprecise, Vrax said. But essentially, yes. Once your species achieves full membership, such actions will be prohibited. Until then, they are permitted under galactic law. The children will be returned to you, another council member added. This one looked like a being made of shadow and mist. No harm has come to them. They were being transported to a facility where they would have been well cared for. Well cared for? Hyunwoo could barely contain his anger. They were stolen from their homes. Their families think they're dead. How is that well cared for? Jimin was scrolling through something on her own tablet. Her face had gone from shocked to horrified. Ambassador, she whispered. I'm looking at the galactic trade records. This isn't the first shipment, Hyunwoo turned to her. What? There are records going back years, Jimin said. Her voice was shaking. Mining accidents. Shuttle malfunctions. Pirate raids. Every time children disappeared and were never found. The numbers match up with trade transactions. She looked up at the council. How many of our children have you taken? Overseer Vrax did not seem bothered by the question. I do not have exact numbers. The trade in juvenile specimens is handled by private companies, not the council directly. But it is a common practice. Your concern, while understandable, is misplaced. This is simply how things work in the galaxy. How things work, Hyunwoo repeated. He felt like he might be sick. You steal children and call it research. You cage them and call it care. And you expect us to accept this as normal? Every species goes through this, another council member said. It is unfortunate but necessary. Once you join the council, it will stop. You must be patient, Minho was crying now. Silent tears ran down his face. He was young, barely 23 years old. He probably had younger siblings at home. Hyunwoo looked around the chamber. These aliens, these council members who claimed to represent civilized society, saw nothing wrong with what had happened. To them, human children were just things to be studied or collected or used. How many? He asked again. Give me a number. How many human children are out there right now? In your facilities, in your collections, in your research labs? Vrax was quiet for a long moment. I will have my staff compile the information. But I must stress that these children are being treated well. They are valuable specimens. They are children, Jimin said. Her voice was cold now. They have names. They have families. They are not specimens. Hyunwoo took a deep breath. He needed to think. He needed to stay calm. But all he could see were the faces of those 47 children in the report, sleeping in stasis, unaware they were being bought and sold. This presentation is over, he said. We will return when you have the information we requested. Every child, every location, every facility that has taken human children. Ambassador, Vrax said, I urge you not to overreact. This is standard procedure. Your emotional response, while natural for your species, is not productive. Hyunwoo turned and walked toward the exit. Jimin and Minho followed. As they reached the doors, he stopped and looked back. You caged our children, he said quietly. Remember that. When we return, remember that you caged our children and told us it was normal. The doors closed behind them. In the hallway, Minho finally broke down completely. Jimin held him while he sobbed. Hyunwoo stood with his back against the wall and closed his eyes. They had come here hoping to join the galactic community. They had come with open hearts and peaceful intentions, and they had discovered that the price of membership was accepting that their children could be stolen, studied, and traded like animals. Hyunwoo knew with absolute certainty that humanity would never accept that price. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. The question was what they would do about it, and that answer frightened him more than anything the council had said. The next morning, the council chamber was packed. Word had spread that something important was happening. Representatives from species Hyunwoo had never seen before filled the observation galleries. Everyone wanted to witness what came next. Subin arrived early. The ancient Telshara took a position at the center of the chamber floor, not in the elevated seats where the council members sat. It was a statement. Subin was not acting as a council member today. It was acting as something else. A witness. A judge, Overseer Vrax, called the session to order. We are here to address the concerns raised by the human delegation regarding the treatment of their juvenile population. Ambassador Subin has requested to speak first. Subin's form solidified into something more defined. It looked almost like an elderly human woman now with silver hair and kind eyes. But those eyes held the weight of 10,000 years. I have spent the night reviewing our history, Subin began. When the Intergalactic Council was founded, 3 species came together with a simple goal. We wanted to create a civilization worthy of the stars. We wanted to be better than we had been. The being walked slowly around the chamber as it spoke. We wrote founding documents. We created laws. And at the center of everything, we placed one absolute principle: the protection of children, all children, from all species, without exception. Subin stopped and looked directly at a Vraxian council member. Your species has crystalline offspring that spend centuries in larval form. They are vulnerable during that time. Fragile. Would you accept their harvest as research specimens? The Vraxian shifted uncomfortably but did not answer. Subin turned to the Krell representative. Your young are born helpless. They depend on the hive for everything. Food, warmth, protection. Imagine them taken from that safety, caged, studied. How would your people react? The Krell's antennae drooped. It made a clicking sound that the translator did not process. One by one, Subin addressed each species represented in the council. The Draconians whose eggs took decades to hatch. The Lumarians whose children were born as pure light and had to learn to take solid form. The shadow beings whose young existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Every species had children that were precious and vulnerable. Every species would be horrified to see their young treated as the humans had been. But they had all accepted the system because it did not affect them anymore. They were safe. Their children were protected by law. You have become complacent, Subin said. You have forgotten what it means to be vulnerable. You have forgotten what it feels like to be powerless while your children suffer. The Telshara's voice grew harder. But I remember. I was there when we built this council on principles we swore were sacred. And I watched as those principles were eroded one small compromise at a time. First, we said children of member species were protected. Then we added exceptions for research. Then we created the concept of pre-council species whose young had fewer protections. Then we allowed private trade in juveniles as long as proper permits were filed. Subin's form flickered with anger. Each change seemed reasonable at the time. Each was presented as a practical necessity. And now look what we have become. We are slavers. We traffic in children, and we call it civilization. The chamber was absolutely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. I did not come here to shame you, Subin said more quietly. I came to warn you. Because I have studied these humans. I have reviewed their history. I have analyzed their psychology. And I tell you now with absolute certainty that you have made a terrible mistake. The Tal Shara turned to face Hyun Woo and the human delegation. Humans are unique in the galaxy. They bond with young of all species, not just their own. They rescue injured animals. They weep at stories of orphaned aliens. They cannot tolerate the suffering of children. This is not a weakness, Subin continued. This is the most dangerous trait a species can possess. Because throughout their history, the fastest way to unite humans has been to threaten their children. They have fought wars over this. They have toppled empires. They have burned entire civilizations to ash when children were endangered. Yunwoo felt every eye in the chamber turned to him. He kept his face neutral, but his heart was pounding. You believe they will accept this injustice, Subin said to the council. You believe they will be practical. You believe they will bow to your laws and wait patiently for membership. You are catastrophically wrong. Overseer Vrax finally spoke. What do you suggest will happen instead? Subin's form expanded, filling more of the chamber. I will tell you exactly what will happen. You have two possible futures before you. In the first future, humans accept the situation. They join the council. They smile and cooperate, but inside they seethe. They remember every child that was taken. They remember every official who told them this was normal. And they wait. They will build their strength quietly. They will learn your technologies. They will study your weaknesses. And when they have the power, they will reshape galactic law, not through violence, but through relentless political pressure. They will make sure this never happens again to anyone. But they will never trust you, never forget what you did, and every decision they make will be colored by this betrayal. You will have them as members, but as enemies who smile while planning your obsolescence. Several council members looked uncomfortable. A few tried to protest, but Subin continued. In the second future, humans reject your offer. They withdraw from galactic civilization. They seal their borders and retreat to their corner of space. And they build. They will pour every resource into becoming stronger. They will develop weapons you cannot imagine. They will create defenses you cannot breach. And when they return to the galaxy, it will not be as applicants seeking membership. It will be as conquerors demanding justice. They will impose their values by force because you did not give them the chance to do so through diplomacy, and they will be merciless because you taught them that might makes right. A draconian representative stood up. These are threats. We do not respond to threats. These are not threats, Subin said calmly. These are predictions based on 10,000 years of observing how species behave. I have watched civilizations rise and fall. I have seen patterns repeat across hundreds of worlds. The Tal Shara moved closer to the draconian. When you harm someone's children and then tell them it is legal, you do not create compliance. You create an enemy who will never stop, never forgive, never forget. Humans have a saying, Subin continued. Do not mess with someone's kids. This is not advice. It is a warning written in the ashes of every civilization that failed to heed it. Minho was gripping his chair so hard his knuckles were white. Jimin had tears running down her face, though she made no sound. Hyunwoo felt something building in his chest. Pride mixed with fury, mixed with grief. Subin turned back to the full council. You have a third option. The right option. Return every child. Prosecute every trafficker. Rewrite your laws to match the principles you claim to hold. Make this right. If you do this, humans will remember. But they will remember your willingness to change. They will remember that you listened when confronted with your mistakes. And they will become the most loyal allies you have ever known. Because that is also part of human nature. They are fierce protectors, yes, but they are also capable of forgiveness when justice is served. They reward those who do right by their children. Overseer Vrax was quiet for a long time. Finally, it spoke. These changes you suggest would require rewriting fundamental aspects of galactic law. The process could take decades. Then you had better start now, Subin said. Because the humans are not going to wait decades for justice. Hyunwoo stood up. Every being in the chamber looked at him. He took a breath and spoke clearly. Ambassador Subin is correct. Humanity will not accept this situation. We came here hoping to join your civilization. We came with open hearts and peaceful intentions. But we will not purchase membership with the suffering of our children. You have 3,000 of our young ones scattered across the galaxy. You have subjected them to experiences no child should endure. And you tell us this is normal. This is legal. This is just how things work. Hyunwoo's voice grew harder. We reject your normal. We reject your legal. We reject your entire system if this is what it requires. We are leaving this station. We are going to retrieve our children. Every single one of them. And then we will decide what happens next. Overseer Vrak stood. Ambassador Hyunwoo, please reconsider. We can negotiate. We can find a compromise. There is no compromise when it comes to children, Hyunwoo said quietly. That is what you need to understand. That is what Ambassador Subin has been trying to tell you. Some things are not negotiable. He turned to Jimin and Minho. We're done here. As they walked toward the exit, Subin's voice followed them. Go with my blessing, humans. Do what you must do. And know that when you return, if you return, I will be waiting to welcome you properly. The doors closed behind them. The human delegation left the council station within hours. Behind them, they left chaos and fear, and the beginning of something that would change the galaxy forever. In the council chamber, Subin stood alone among the panicking representatives. The ancient Talshara smiled sadly. It had seen this pattern before. The news reached Earth before the delegation did. Every human on every world heard what had been done to their children. The reaction was immediate and absolute. Rage swept across humanity like wildfire. Within 24 hours, every human ship in space received the same order. Come home, every diplomat was recalled. Every trade agreement was suspended. Every cultural exchange was terminated. Humanity sealed its borders completely. No alien ships were permitted to enter human space. No communication was answered. The galaxy went silent where humans had been. It was like watching a star go dark. But before the borders closed completely, one last group of ships left Earth. These were military vessels, fast and well-armed. They were led by Commander Tae Yang, a veteran who had spent 20 years protecting human colonies from pirates and raiders. Tae Yang was a quiet man with gray hair and steady hands. He had 3 children of his own. When he learned what had been done, he volunteered immediately to lead the recovery mission. The government did not have to ask twice. Jimin gave him the locations. 15 facilities across 12 star systems. Research labs, private collections, entertainment venues, labor colonies. Every place where human children had been taken. The strikes were coordinated to happen simultaneously. Tae Yang's ships appeared without warning, moved fast and left before local authorities could respond. They did not kill anyone. They did not destroy property unless necessary. But they made their message absolutely clear. Touch human children and face the consequences. The first facility was a research lab on a Vraxian moon. The scientists there studied how different species developed. They had 6 human children, ages 7 to 12. The children had been there for 2 years. When Tai Yang's team breached the facility, they found the children in comfortable rooms. They were well-fed, healthy, and receiving education. But they were not free. They could not leave. They were studied every day like laboratory animals. One little girl, maybe 8 years old, looked at the armed soldiers in confusion. "Are you here to run tests too?" she asked. Tae Yang knelt down to her level. "No," he said gently. "We're here to take you home." The girl started crying. "I don't remember home." That moment stayed with Tae Yang through all the other raids. Some children were too young to remember Earth. Some had been told their families did not want them anymore. Some had been in captivity so long they were afraid of rescue. But they took them all. 847 children in total. Some from research labs. Some from private collections where wealthy aliens kept humans as exotic pets. Some from entertainment venues where children performed for crowds. Some from mines and factories where small hands were useful. Not all of them could be found. Jimin's data was incomplete. Some children had been moved. Some records were falsified. Some were simply lost in the vast bureaucracy of galactic commerce. Those missing children haunted every human who learned about them. The children who were recovered were brought home to Earth. They were given medical treatment, psychological counseling, and time to heal. But the damage was done. They had been taken from their families and used as objects. That could not be undone. One of those children was a 14-year-old girl named Da-un. She had been taken when she was 10, during a pirate raid on a mining colony. Her parents thought she was dead. For 4 years, she had been in a research facility studying human emotional development. Da-un was smart and strong. She had survived by staying calm and observing everything. When she returned to Earth, she did not cry. She did not break down. Instead, she started asking questions. She wanted to know how many other children had been taken. She wanted to know what the government was doing about it. She wanted to know if this would happen again. When no one could give her satisfactory answers, she decided to find them herself. Meanwhile, behind closed borders, humanity was changing. The rage that had swept the planet did not fade. Instead, it transformed into something more dangerous: cold determination. Jimin became Earth's director of xenological affairs. Her job was simple: study everything the aliens had, learn their technologies, understand their weaknesses, make sure humanity was never vulnerable again. Thousands of scientists worked under her direction. They reverse-engineered alien technology. They developed new weapons and defenses. They created innovations that typically took centuries, driven by anger and protective instinct. Humanity had always been good at war. They had fought each other for thousands of years before reaching the stars. Now all that violent creativity was focused outward, not to conquer but to ensure safety. The military expanded rapidly. Ships were built. Soldiers were trained. Defensive stations were constructed around every human world. The message was clear to anyone watching. Humanity was preparing for something. The Galactic Council sent envoys to human space. They were turned away without response. They sent messages of apology. The messages were deleted unread. They sent threats about trade sanctions and diplomatic isolation. The threats were ignored. 5 years passed. 5 years of silence from humanity. The galaxy began to worry. The Krell reported strange sightings. Human ships appeared at the edges of their territory, watching and recording, then vanishing before they could be contacted. The Draconians reported the same thing. So did the Vraxians. Humanity was observing them, learning their patterns, mapping their territories, but making no aggressive moves. It was unsettling. Overseer Vrax dismissed the concerns in council meetings. Humans are confined to their space. They are angry but powerless. They will eventually realize they need us more than we need them. They will return and accept our terms. Subin, who attended every meeting, warned them repeatedly. You underestimate them. They are not preparing to negotiate. They are preparing to ensure this never happens again. But most council members were not worried. Humanity was one small species in a galaxy of thousands. What could they possibly do? In the 5th year of silence, something changed. A message reached the council. It was not from the human government. It was not from Ambassador Hyunwoo. It came from something called the Recovered Children's Foundation. The message was a video. It showed Da-un, now 19 years old, standing in front of a simple background. Behind her were dozens of other young people, all of them recovered children. Da-un spoke calmly and clearly. My name is Da-un. When I was 10 years old, I was taken from my home. I spent 4 years in an alien research facility. I was told my family thought I was dead. I was told that what was happening to me was normal and legal. I want to show you what that meant. I want you to understand what your laws did to us. The video that followed was not violent. It was not graphic, but it was devastating. Child after child spoke about their experiences. The loneliness, the fear, the confusion about why no one came to save them. They showed scars not from physical abuse, but from abandonment. They talked about nightmares, about forgetting their parents' faces, about learning to exist as objects rather than people. One boy, who had been taken at age 6 and found at age 12, said quietly, I forgot how to be a person. I only knew how to be a specimen. The video ended with Da-un looking directly at the camera. We forgive you. We understand you did not know what you were doing, but humanity will never forget, and neither will we. We are not telling you this story to make you feel guilty. We are telling you this story so you understand what comes next. Because our parents, our siblings, our people watched us suffer. They saw us taken and caged and used, and they will never let it happen again. Not to us. Not to anyone. Not anywhere in this galaxy. The video ended. The council chamber was silent for a long time. Overseer Vrax, who had been so dismissive, did not speak. The crystalline being seemed to have dimmed somehow. Subin stood up. Do you understand now? This is not about politics or trade or membership. This is personal. Every human who watched their government fail to protect those children. Every parent who lost a child. Every sibling who never got answers. They all remember. Humanity is not preparing for war. They are preparing to make sure this never happens again. And that should terrify you, because they will succeed. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Intergalactic Council realized they had made a species into an enemy that would never stop, never compromise, and never forget. The question now was whether they could make things right before it was too late. And many council members, looking at that video of calm, determined children, feared that it might already be too late. 6 months after Dayun's video reached the galaxy, the council made an unprecedented decision. They invited humanity back, not as applicants, but as full members with immediate voting rights. More importantly, they proposed sweeping changes to galactic law. The proposal was called the Treaty of Children. It was radical in its scope. All trafficking of juveniles would be criminalized regardless of species status. The law would be retroactive for 50 years, meaning past crimes would be prosecuted. A new enforcement division would be created, led jointly by the Tal Shara and human representatives. Reparations would be paid to affected families, and the founding principles about protecting children would be restored as unchangeable law. It was everything humanity had demanded and more. But Hyunwoo, older now and marked by 5 years of carrying this burden, was cautious. He read the proposal carefully before responding. He traveled back to the council station with Jimin and Minho. The chamber looked the same, but everything felt different. The council members who had been dismissive before now watched the humans with something like fear. Hyunwoo stood in the center of the chamber and presented humanity's response. His voice was calm but firm. We accept the treaty, but we have conditions. First, every child must be accounted for, not just the ones we recovered, but all children taken over 30 years. We want to know what happened to every single one. Living or dead, we demand the truth. Second, human representatives will serve on inspection teams. We will have authority to visit any facility in council space without warning to ensure compliance. This is not negotiable. Third, the council must acknowledge publicly that these practices were always wrong, not just inconvenient or unfortunate, wrong, morally indefensible. No species should have endured this transition period. It should never have existed. Overseer Vrax, who had tried to dismiss human concerns 5 years ago, spoke quietly. These conditions are acceptable. We will begin implementation immediately. Subin, who had been present for every meeting, stood to address the council one final time. I want to be clear about something. I did not do this for humanity. I did this for the council. The ancient Tal Shara looked around the chamber. You were walking toward moral decay. You were becoming something unworthy of the stars. The humans gave me the opportunity to stop you before you fell too far. I have witnessed 3 great civilizations fall in my lifetime. Each collapsed not from external threats but from internal rot. The moment a society decides that some lives matter less than others, they begin the countdown to their own destruction. You were saved by human outrage, not because humans are superior, but because they refused to accept compromise when it came to children. That refusal forced you to remember what you had forgotten. The treaty was put to a vote. It passed unanimously, not because every council member had suddenly developed a conscience, but because the alternative was unthinkable. Humanity had demonstrated capability, resolve, and most importantly, patience. They were willing to wait decades for justice. That frightened the council more than any weapon could. Over the next 10 years, enforcement teams led by Commander Tae Yang shut down trafficking operations across the galaxy. They recovered hundreds more children from dozens of species, not just humans. Grell larvae, Vraxian crystalline youth, draconian eggs, Lumerian light beings. It turned out that humans were not the only victims. They had simply been the first to say no loudly enough to be heard. Many other species had suffered in silence, accepting it as the price of joining civilization. Prosecutions were swift and comprehensive. Species that had profited from the trade faced severe penalties. But more importantly, the culture began to change. The galactic community started seeing juvenile protection not as a burden, but as a measure of true civilization. Jimin established the Xenological Protection Initiative. It was a research organization dedicated to studying the developmental needs of all species. Their goal was to ensure that scientific curiosity never again justified exploitation. The organization became one of the most respected institutions in the galaxy. It was staffed by researchers from hundreds of species, all working toward a common goal: protecting the vulnerable. Humanity took its place among the stars, but on its own terms. They maintained their military capabilities openly. The ships, the weapons, the defensive stations. Everything was visible to anyone who cared to look. The message was clear. Try this again with any species and there will be consequences. But humanity also became known for something else. They were fierce advocates for anyone vulnerable. They fought for refugee protections. They pushed for slavery abolition. They demanded rights for artificial intelligences and uplifted species. Human diplomats had a reputation. They would fight to the death over protections for the weak. But they were also reliable partners in trade, technology exchange, and mutual defense. They remembered both wrongs and rights. The recovered children grew into adults who shaped their civilization's future. Dayun became humanity's youngest ambassador at age 25. She was known for her calm determination and her absolute refusal to compromise on matters of justice. Minho, the young aide who had first discovered the trafficking, became Earth's chief prosecutor for interstellar crime. He specialized in cases involving exploitation of vulnerable populations. His record was flawless. 20 years after the original confrontation, Ambassador Hyunwoo retired. At his farewell ceremony on the council station, representatives from across the galaxy attended. Even species that had initially opposed the treaty reforms came to honor him. Subin gave the keynote address. The ancient Tal Shara looked no different than it had 20 years before. Time moved differently for beings that lived for millennia. 20 years ago, I confronted this council about caged children, Subin said. I was not certain how humanity would respond. They could have accepted the injustice. They could have waged war. Instead, they chose a third path. They applied relentless principled pressure. They demonstrated that moral courage does not require violence. It requires conviction. And humans, when it comes to protecting children, have conviction in abundance. As Hyunwoo stood to accept honors from the council, something unexpected happened. A young Krell approached the stage. It was one of the larvae rescued by human teams 10 years before, now an adult member of its species. In its chittering language, translated for the assembly, it said, "You saved me. But more than that, you taught my people that we were wrong. You showed us that power should protect the vulnerable, not exploit them. That is a greater gift than rescue." Hyunwoo, who had carried the weight of this mission for 2 decades, finally allowed himself to feel something like peace. The children were safe. The laws had changed. The galaxy was better than it had been. It was not perfect. Some children had never been found. Some scars would never fully heal. But it was better. And humanity had made it so. Subin's warning became a case study in diplomatic academies across the galaxy. Students learned about the species that walked away from civilization rather than compromise on protecting children. They learned about the documentary from Da-Un and the other survivors. They learned about the rebuke that changed everything. And they learned a phrase that became associated with humanity's entry into the galactic community. You caged our children, we will never forget. But there was a second part to that phrase, less famous but equally important. We will never forget, but we will forgive if you change. And if you change, we will help you change others. That was the true human gift to the galaxy, not their capacity for violence or their technological innovation. It was their ability to be both unforgiving of injustice and generous with second chances. They remembered every wrong, but they also celebrated every right. They held grudges forever against those who harmed children, but they became the most loyal allies to those who protected them. Years later, when new species approached the Council for membership, they were taught human history early. Not as a threat, but as an example. They learned about what happened when a civilization tried to compromise on protecting children. They learned that some values are non-negotiable. Some lines cannot be crossed without consequences. And they learned that the measure of a civilization is not its technology or its territory. It is how it treats the most vulnerable members of any society. Humanity did not conquer the galaxy. They did not impose their will by force. They did not become the dominant species or rule over others. Instead, they did something more profound. They transformed galactic civilization by refusing to accept that harming children could ever be normal, legal, or justified. They insisted that protection of the young was not a luxury of powerful species. It was the foundation of any society worthy of the stars. And in doing so, they proved what Subin had known from the beginning. The most dangerous thing in the galaxy is not a species with powerful weapons. It is a species with unshakable principles and the courage to defend them. Dayun, now 40 years old and one of the most respected diplomats in the galaxy, sometimes thought about those 4 years in captivity, the loneliness, the fear, the confusion, but she also thought about what came after. The rescue, the changes, the laws that now protected every child in known space. Her suffering had not been in vain.